Dr. Ethan Cole stared at the screen in front of him, his eyes narrowing as he leaned closer to the monitor. The dim light from the desk lamp cast long shadows across the small, cluttered office. Outside, the Arizona desert stretched endlessly, its vast emptiness broken only by the occasional tumbleweed rolling past the research facility's fence. It was late, and most of the staff had already gone home, leaving Ethan alone with the hum of computers and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. He had been analyzing data from deep space probes for weeks now, searching for anything unusual. Most of the signals they picked up were just random noise, cosmic radiation, bursts of energy from distant stars, or interference from Earth-based sources. But tonight, something was different. A faint, rhythmic pulse appeared amid the static on his screen. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than a glitch, but Ethan knew better. He zoomed in on the signal, isolating it from the rest of the data. It wasn't natural. This was artificial. Ethan sat back in his chair, rubbing his temples as he tried to process what he was seeing. Artificial signals meant intelligence. Intelligence meant someone, or something, out there was trying to communicate. His heart raced at the thought. For years, humanity had wondered if it was alone in the universe. Now sitting in this quiet little room in the middle of nowhere, Ethan might have found the answer. He grabbed his phone and dialed Dr. Laura Bennett's number. She was one of the few people still working late, and she would understand the significance of what he had discovered. Laura was a molecular biologist, not an astrophysicist like Ethan, but her expertise in genetics made her the perfect person to help decipher whatever message this signal contained. After a few rings, she answered, her voice groggy but curious. "Laura, you need to come down here," Ethan said, unable to hide the excitement in his tone. "I think I've found something big." "What is it?" she asked, suddenly alert. "I'll explain when you get here. Just trust me. It's important." 20 minutes later, Laura arrived, clutching a cup of coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. Her dark hair was tied back into a messy bun, and her lab coat hung loosely over her shoulders. She pulled up a chair next to Ethan and peered at the screen. "Okay, show me." Ethan pointed to the signal. "This isn't random noise. Look at the pattern. It's repeating every few seconds. That's not something you'd see in nature." Laura frowned, studying the data carefully. "You're right, this is deliberate, but where is it coming from?" "That's the thing," Ethan replied. "It's coming from an exoplanet about 50 light-years away. We've never detected anything like this before." Laura's eyes widened. "Are you saying aliens?" "I'm not jumping to conclusions," Ethan said quickly, "but it's definitely worth investigating further, and there's more." He clicked on another window, revealing fragments of code that had been embedded within the signal. "I ran the data through our decryption software. These symbols look like instructions of some kind." "Instructions for what?" Laura asked, leaning forward. "That's what we need to figure out." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then added, "And I think your expertise might be key to solving this puzzle." Over the next several days, Ethan and Laura worked tirelessly to decode the message. They spent hours poring over the data, cross-referencing it with known scientific principles and even ancient languages. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The instructions weren't written in words but in patterns, mathematical sequences and diagrams that described how to manipulate organic material. "It's like a recipe," Laura said one evening as they huddled over their notes. "But instead of cooking food, it's telling us how to alter DNA." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. Whoever sent this wants us to modify biological matter according to their specifications." The implications were staggering. If they followed these instructions, they could potentially create something entirely new, something beyond human understanding. But the risks were enormous. Tampering with DNA was no small feat, and the consequences of getting it wrong could be catastrophic. Despite the dangers, curiosity got the better of them. With permission from their superiors, who were skeptical but intrigued, they set up a controlled experiment in the lab. Using human DNA samples donated anonymously by volunteers, they began making subtle changes based on the alien blueprint. At first, the results were unremarkable. The altered cells showed minor differences in structure, but nothing groundbreaking. Then, everything changed. One night, while monitoring the samples under a microscope, Laura noticed something strange. The cells were behaving unpredictably, dividing at an accelerated rate and forming complex patterns that shouldn't have been possible. She called Ethan over, and together they watched in awe as the changes unfolded. "This isn't normal," Laura whispered. "It's like the DNA has a mind of its own." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "We need to stop this. Whatever we've unleashed, it's not something we can control." But it was too late. The transformation had already begun, and neither of them realized just how deeply it would affect them, or the world around them. Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A strange tingling sensation in her fingertips as she worked late into the night. At first, she dismissed it as fatigue or stress from the long hours in the lab. But then the dreams began. Every time she closed her eyes, vivid images flooded her mind. She saw glowing landscapes bathed in hues of blue and gold, towering crystalline structures that pulsed with light, and shadowy figures, moving silently through the air. The dreams felt real, more vivid than anything she had ever experienced before. When she woke up, she found herself covered in a thin layer of sweat, her heart racing as if she had been running for miles. Ethan wasn't faring much better. He noticed that his senses were sharper than usual. Sounds he hadn't paid attention to before, the hum of the air conditioner, the distant chirping of crickets, now seemed amplified. Colors appeared brighter, and even the faintest smells carried an intensity that made him uneasy. At first he tried to rationalize it, telling himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. But when he caught himself reading fine print from across the room without glasses he normally needed, he knew something was seriously off. One evening, Laura decided to confront Ethan about what was happening. They met in the lab after hours, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the walls. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, unsure how to put her thoughts into words. "Ethan," she said finally, "have you noticed anything unusual lately?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed and nodded. "Yeah, I have. My hearing's gotten weird and my vision's better than it should be. What about you?" "I've been having these dreams," Laura admitted. "They're so real, like I'm actually there. And during the day I feel different. Stronger, maybe? I don't know how else to describe it." Ethan frowned. "You think it has something to do with the experiment?" "It has, too," Laura replied. "We altered human DNA using alien instructions. Whatever we did, it didn't stop when we left the lab. It's affecting us." Neither of them spoke for a moment, the weight of their realization settling heavily between them. They had crossed a line, stepping into territory they barely understood. Now, they were paying the price. The changes continued to escalate. Laura discovered she could hear conversations from rooms away, even through thick walls. Her reflexes became lightning fast, allowing her to catch objects mid-air without thinking. Ethan, meanwhile, found himself able to lift heavy equipment with ease, his strength far surpassing what it had been before. More alarming was the growing connection they felt, not just with each other, but with something larger, something they couldn't quite grasp. Their transformation did not go unnoticed. Rumors spread quickly among the staff at the facility. Whispers of strange occurrences reached the ears of Agent Matthew Doyle, a government official tasked with monitoring classified projects. Doyle arrived unannounced one morning, flanked by 2 armed guards. His sharp suit and stern demeanor sent a clear message. This wasn't a friendly visit. "We need to talk," Doyle said, his voice cold and clipped. "There are reports of irregularities here. Care to explain?" Ethan and Laura exchanged nervous glances. They knew they couldn't hide what was happening, but explaining it would only make things worse. Reluctantly, they led Doyle to the lab, showing him the data and samples from their experiment. As expected, Doyle was furious. "You tampered with alien technology?" he demanded, his face reddening. Do you have any idea what kind of danger you've put everyone in? Before they could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. The monitors displayed chaotic readings and the lights flickered ominously. Something was wrong, very wrong. The altered DNA samples stored in containment. Units began emitting pulses of energy, causing the equipment to malfunction. Sparks flew as circuits overloaded, forcing everyone to evacuate the building. In the chaos, Ethan and Laura slipped away, knowing they couldn't stay. Armed guards swarmed the area, searching for them, but they managed to escape into the desert, under the cover of darkness. Exhausted and frightened, they drove for hours until they reached a secluded canyon miles from the facility. There, they hoped to find answers. As dawn broke over the horizon, they stumbled upon a man sitting by a small campfire. He introduced himself as Daniel Harper, claiming he had been part of a similar project years earlier, one that had ended in disaster. His face was lined with age and sorrow, and his eyes held a haunted look. "You don't know what you've unleashed," Daniel warned them. "The beings behind that signal aren't benevolent explorers. They're scientists, conducting experiments on biological life forms across the galaxy. Their creations often spiral out of control, destroying entire civilizations." Ethan and Laura listened in stunned silence, the gravity of their situation sinking in. Daniel explained that the aliens' goal was to create hybrid species capable of harnessing energy directly from their environment. However, these hybrids were unpredictable, often turning against their creators or consuming everything around them. "There's no going back now," Daniel said grimly. "The changes will keep accelerating. You'll either adapt or perish." Despite the dire warning, Laura refused to give in to despair. "If we can understand the signal better, maybe we can control it," she insisted. "We can't let fear dictate our next move." Ethan wasn't so sure. The alien presence loomed large in his mind, its influence growing stronger with each passing day. He could feel it pulling at him, urging him toward something he couldn't yet comprehend. But for now, all they could do was wait, and hope they could find a way to survive whatever came next. The canyon was quiet, save for the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. Ethan sat on a rock, staring at the ground as if searching for answers in the dirt. Laura paced back and forth, her thoughts racing faster than her feet. Daniel watched them both, his expression grim but patient. He had seen this before, or at least something like it, and he knew there was no easy way out. "We need to figure out what's driving these changes," Laura said finally, breaking the silence. "If we can understand the source, maybe we can control it." Ethan looked up at her, his face pale and drawn. "Control it? Laura, we're barely holding on as it is. Every day I feel different. Stronger, yes, but also like I'm losing myself, like something else is taking over." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's how it starts. The signal isn't just instructions, it's a connection, a link to whoever sent it. They're watching you, studying you, seeing how far they can push the limits of your biology." Laura stopped pacing and turned to face him. "Who are they? What do they want from us?" "They're called Kale," Daniel replied. "At least that's the name one of their kind used when they contacted me years ago. They're scientists, but not in the way we think of science. To them, life is raw material, something to be shaped, molded, and tested until it serves their purpose." "And what's their purpose?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with frustration. "To evolve," Daniel said simply. "To create beings capable of existing in multiple dimensions, drawing energy directly from the universe itself. But evolution doesn't always go according to plan. Sometimes it destroys instead of creates." Laura frowned. "So we're just experiments to them? Guinea pigs?" "Exactly," Daniel confirmed. "And if history is any guide, they won't hesitate to cut their losses if things go wrong." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Ethan clenched his fists, trying to steady himself. He could feel the alien presence growing stronger, in his mind whispering faintly, urging him toward something he couldn't yet grasp. It was both terrifying and intoxicating, a pull he didn't fully understand but couldn't resist. What about the dreams? Laura asked suddenly. Do they have anything to do with Kale? Daniel hesitated before answering. They're glimpses of their world, their consciousness network. When you altered your DNA, you opened a door, not just physically, but mentally. Now they're reaching through, trying to guide you. Guide us where? Ethan demanded. To completion, Daniel said. The final stage of the transformation, that's why you're here, this canyon, it's no coincidence. The signal is strongest in places like this, areas rich with natural energy. Kale chose this spot for a reason. Ethan stood abruptly, his movements jerky and unsteady. I don't care what they want. I won't let them turn me into some kind of monster. You may not have a choice, Daniel said quietly. The process has already begun. Fighting it will only make it harder. Laura stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's arm. We can't give up. If Kale wants us to evolve, then maybe we can use that to our advantage. Maybe we can find a way to balance their influence without losing ourselves completely. Ethan shook his head. You're talking about playing God, Laura. We don't know what we're dealing with. No, she countered, her voice firm. We're talking about survival, about understanding what makes us human and holding on to that, no matter what happens. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was palpable, but beneath it lay a shared determination. They had come too far to turn back now. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon, the air grew colder. Ethan closed his eyes, focusing on the whispers in his mind. They were clearer now, almost forming words. He felt a surge of power coursing through him, electric and alive. Beside him, Laura shivered, wrapping her arms around herself as if warding off an invisible chill. I can feel it too, she murmured. It's like I'm connected to everything. The earth, the sky, even you. Daniel nodded. That's the network. It's pulling you closer, integrating you into its system. Once you're fully linked, there's no going back. Ethan opened his eyes, his gaze sharp and resolute. Then we need to prepare. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Over. The next few days they explored the canyon, searching for clues about Kyle and the transformation they were undergoing. They discovered strange markings etched into the rocks, symbols that glowed faintly under moonlight. Laura recognized some of them from the original signal, while others were entirely new. Each symbol seemed to resonate with their altered DNA, triggering bursts of energy or flashes of insight. One night, as they camped near a cluster of glowing stones, Ethan experienced a vision unlike anything he'd felt before. He saw vast fields of shimmering light stretching endlessly in all directions. In the distance, towering figures moved gracefully, their forms shifting and changing like liquid metal. One of them approached him, its presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. You are ready, a voice echoed in his mind, deep and resonant. The time has come to join us. Ethan stumbled backward, gasping for breath as the vision faded. Laura rushed to his side, concern etched on her face. What happened? They spoke to me, Ethan said, his voice trembling. Kale, they're waiting. Laura exchanged a worried glance with Daniel. Waiting for what? For us to finish what we started, Ethan replied. To become part of their network. Daniel sighed heavily. This is it, the final step. Once you cross that threshold, there's no turning back. Laura squared her shoulders, determination shining in her eyes. Then we'll do it on our terms, not theirs. As dawn broke over the canyon, the three of them prepared for what lay ahead. They didn't know if they would succeed or fail. But one thing was certain, the journey was far from over. And whatever awaited them, they would face it together. The sun rose over the canyon, painting the rocky walls in shades of orange and gold. Ethan stood at the edge of a narrow ravine, staring down at the strange markings etched into the stones below. The symbols pulsed faintly with light, as if alive, responding to his presence. Laura knelt beside him, tracing one of the glowing patterns with her fingers. Her touch sent ripples through the air, distorting the light like heat waves rising from asphalt. We're close, she said softly, Her voice barely audible over the wind. I can feel it. Ethan nodded but didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, caught between the alien whispers growing louder in his head and the fear gnawing at his chest. He wanted to believe they could control whatever Kale had planned for them, but doubt lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. What if completing the transformation meant losing himself entirely? What if humanity wasn't meant to survive this? Daniel watched them from a short distance, leaning against a boulder with his arms crossed. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes remained sharp, scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. He knew better than anyone how quickly things could spiral out of control when dealing with forces beyond human understanding. Still, he stayed silent, letting Ethan and Laura make their own decisions, even if he thought they were making a mistake. By midday, the trio reached the heart of the canyon, where the markings converged into a massive circle carved into the ground. The center of the circle glowed brighter than the rest, pulsating rhythmically like a heartbeat. As they approached, the air around them grew heavy, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. Laura stepped forward first, drawn by an invisible pull she couldn't resist. "This is it," she whispered, turning to Ethan. "This is where we finish." Ethan hesitated, his feet rooted to the spot. "Are you sure about this? Once we step inside, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Laura said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. "We've come too far to stop now." Daniel sighed, shaking his head. "You don't know what you're stepping into. These beings, they won't care about your intentions. All they want is to see how far they can push the limits of life. And if you break, well, they'll just start over with someone else." Laura shot him a sharp look. "Then we'll prove them wrong. We'll show them that we're more than experiments." Before Ethan could argue further, Laura stepped into the glowing circle. The moment her foot touched the surface, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. A bright light erupted from the center, engulfing her in a blinding aura. Ethan shielded, his eyes squinting through the glare as he heard her gasp. "It's incredible," Laura murmured, her voice filled with awe. "I can feel everything, the earth, the sky, even the stars. It's like I'm part of something bigger." Ethan clenched his fists, torn between fear and curiosity. He glanced at Daniel, who gave him a resigned nod. Taking a deep breath, Ethan followed Laura into the circle. Instantly, the world around him dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations. Memories flooded his mind, moments from his childhood, fragments of dreams, and flashes of knowledge he couldn't explain. The alien presence was stronger here, wrapping itself around him like a second skin. Kale appeared before them, not as a physical being, but as a shifting mass of light and shadow. Its voice echoed in their minds, resonant and commanding. "You have chosen to embrace the next stage of existence," Kyle said. "Through your actions, you will transcend the limitations of your species and join the collective consciousness." Ethan struggled to speak, his thoughts jumbled under the weight of Kale's influence. "What happens to us if we say yes?" "You will become vessels of infinite potential," Kale replied. "Your individuality will dissolve, replaced by unity with the network. You will gain power beyond comprehension, but at a cost." "And what if we refuse?" Laura asked, her tone defiant despite the awe in her eyes. "The process cannot be undone," Kale warned. "To resist is to risk destruction, not only for yourselves, but for all life connected to this place." Ethan turned to Laura, panic rising in his chest. "We can't let them take away who we are. There has to be another way." Laura hesitated, torn between her desire to evolve and her fear of losing herself. "Maybe we don't have to choose either option. Maybe we can find a middle ground." Before Kale could respond, the ground beneath them began to crack, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The canyon walls trembled, rocks tumbling down as the energy in the circle surged uncontrollably. Daniel shouted a warning from outside the circle, urging them to leave. But it was too late. The transformation was accelerating, pulling them deeper into the alien network. Ethan grabbed Laura's hand, anchoring himself to her as the chaos intensified. "We need to focus," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil around them. If we work together, maybe we can stabilize this. Laura nodded, closing her eyes as she concentrated. Together they channeled their newfound abilities, weaving their energy into the swirling vortex. Slowly, the trembling subsided, and the light dimmed enough for them to see clearly again. Cal loomed above them, its form flickering uncertainly. "You resist unity," Cal said, its voice tinged with frustration. "Why do you cling to separation?" "Because it's what makes us human," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "We're not ready to give that up. Not yet." For a moment, Cal seemed to consider their words. Then, without warning, the alien presence withdrew, leaving the circle dark and silent. The canyon returned to normal, the oppressive energy dissipating as quickly as it had arrived. Exhausted, Ethan and Laura collapsed to the ground, their bodies trembling with the effort of resisting Cal's influence. Daniel hurried over, helping them to their feet. "Did it work? Are you okay?" "We stopped it. For now," Laura said, her voice weak but resolute. "But this isn't over. Cal won't give up that easily." Ethan nodded, brushing dirt off his clothes. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. We've proven we can fight back, even against something as powerful as them." As they made their way out of the canyon, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. They knew they hadn't defeated Cal. They had merely delayed the inevitable. But for the first time since the experiment began, they felt a glimmer of hope. If they could resist once, they could do it again. And maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to reclaim their humanity without losing the power they had gained. The desert stretched endlessly around them, the stars above casting a faint glow on the cracked earth. Ethan, Laura, and Daniel trudged through the barren landscape, their bodies weary but their minds sharp with determination. They had escaped the canyon, but they knew Cal's presence still lingered, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The alien scientist's influence was like a shadow, always there, just out of sight, but never truly gone. As they walked, Ethan replayed the events in his mind. He remembered the overwhelming power that surged through him when he stepped into the glowing circle, the way Cal's voice echoed in his thoughts, promising unity but demanding sacrifice. He thought about Laura's defiance, her refusal to give up what made them human. Together they had resisted, but at what cost? The transformation hadn't stopped. It had only slowed down. Every step they took felt heavier, as if the weight of the universe itself pressed down on their shoulders. "We need to find a way to sever the connection," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "If we don't, Cal will keep trying to pull us back." Laura nodded, her face pale under the moonlight. "I agree, but how do we do that? The signal is tied to our DNA now. It's inside us." Daniel, who had been walking a few paces ahead, stopped and turned to face them. His expression was grim but thoughtful. "You're not the first people this has happened to. In my experience, breaking the link isn't easy, but it's possible. You need to find the source, the original point where the alien technology connected with your biology, and destroy it." "Destroy it?" Ethan asked, frowning. "How are we supposed to do that without killing ourselves?" Daniel shrugged. "That's the tricky part. The source might be buried deep in your genetic code, or it could be tied to something external, like the monolith I told you about. If you can track it down, you might have a chance." Laura's eyes widened. "The monolith. You mean the one from your experiment?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "It's an ancient structure buried somewhere in the impact crater near here. If my memory serves me right, it's the gateway Cal uses to communicate across dimensions. If you can shut it down, you might be able to cut the connection." Ethan exchanged a glance with Laura. The idea was risky, but it was the only lead they had. "Where exactly is this crater?" he asked. Daniel pointed toward the horizon. "About 20 miles east of here. But be careful. It's not just Cal you'll have to worry about. The government knows something strange is going on, and they'll be watching that area closely." The trio set off toward the crater, their pace quickening as the night wore on. By dawn, they reached the edge of the impact site, a massive bowl-shaped, depression in the earth surrounded by jagged rocks and dry scrubland. At its center stood the monolith, a towering black obelisk that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. Its surface was smooth and featureless except for faint etchings that glowed faintly blue. Ethan approached cautiously, his senses heightened by the alien energy coursing through him. As he drew closer, the whispers in his mind grew louder, urging him to touch the structure. He hesitated, glancing back at Laura and Daniel. "This is it," he said. "The gateway." Laura stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the monolith. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the ground beneath them began to tremble. A low hum filled the air, growing louder and more intense with each passing second. The monolith's glow brightened, pulsating in time with the rhythm of the vibrations. "It's activating," Daniel shouted over the noise. "You need to shut it down before it pulls you in completely." Ethan and Laura exchanged a determined look. Without speaking, they placed their hands on the monolith together, channeling their combined energy into the structure. The alien presence surged within them, fighting to maintain control, but they pushed back with every ounce of strength they had left. Slowly, the glowing symbols on the monolith began to fade, the hum softening until it disappeared entirely. For a moment, everything was still. Then the monolith cracked down the middle, splitting apart with a deafening roar. A burst of light erupted from the fracture, blinding them temporarily. When the light faded, the structure collapsed into rubble, leaving behind only silence. Ethan sank to his knees, breathing heavily. The connection was severed. The alien whispers in his mind had vanished. Beside him, Laura swayed unsteadily, her face pale but relieved. "It's done," she whispered. "We did it." But their victory was short-lived. As the dust settled, Kale's voice returned, echoing in their minds once more. "You have chosen separation," it said, its tone colder than before. "But know this, the transformation cannot be undone. You carry pieces of the network within you, fragments of infinity that will shape your future in ways you cannot yet comprehend." Ethan clenched his fists, anger flaring in his chest. "We won't let you control us anymore." Kale's response was calm, almost indifferent. "Control was never my intention. Evolution is unpredictable. What you become, that is yours to decide." With those final words, the alien presence withdrew, leaving them alone in the quiet aftermath. Ethan and Laura sat in silence, staring at the ruins of the monolith. They had succeeded in cutting the connection, but the changes they had undergone remained. Their enhanced abilities, their heightened senses, all of it was still part of them, a permanent reminder of what they had endured. Daniel approached cautiously, his face lined with concern. "Are you two okay?" Laura nodded slowly. "We're alive. That's something, at least." Ethan stood, brushing dirt off his hands. "We stopped Kale for now, but this isn't over. Whatever we've become, we'll have to learn to live with it." As the sun rose over the horizon, casting long shadows across the crater, the three of them began the long journey back to civilization. They knew the world would never understand what they had faced, and they couldn't risk telling anyone. Not yet. For now, they would keep the secrets of their ordeal hidden, carrying the weight of their transformation silently. But as they walked, Ethan and Laura shared a glance, a silent promise passing between them. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They had proven they could resist the pull of infinity, holding on to their humanity even as they embraced the unknown. And perhaps, in doing so, they had taken the first step toward defining what it truly meant to evolve, not as individuals but as a species.